This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Spectra 1964, Sampley, Carl Tatz Design, and iZotope. In fact, you're hearing my voice right now through iZotope RX and Ozone, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD. So get ready to rock.
People can sense the truth, and it's a really strange thing. They can sense it without even knowing that they're sensing it. When you hear Lennon, when you hear Kurt Cobain, when you hear Amy Winehouse, you sort of subconsciously know you're listening to some profound truth that's coming from deep within them. And you don't even know it. You just think, wow, what a great vocal. And I think what makes great artists is people that can access that well, whatever it is, pain, whatever that might be.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Do you need to record direct stereo keyboards? Spectra 1964 now offers the Stereo BBDI-2 with custom wound high-Z transformers for big headroom, virtually flat response, and a 15 dB input pad. The Spectra 1964 BBDI passive direct box is also perfect for recording deep bass that will make your mixes sound huge. Plug that into a C610 complementer, and as founder Bill Cheney points out, it'll move your pant leg. Get your sound moving at Spectra1964.com. If you are rocking a Mac Mini M1 in your studio, then you should definitely check out the new OWC Mini Stack STX Thunderbolt 4 certified storage and hub expansion solution. It's the perfect size to seamlessly stack with the Mac Mini and add storage and connectivity over Thunderbolt or USB. Whether you have the new or old Mac Mini, nothing stacks up in your studio quite like OWC. Find the new Mini Stack STX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. Howdy Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Jack Rubinacci, an Anglo-Italian singer, songwriter, producer, and author now based in Norway. Jack started playing in bands in his hometown Birmingham UK and was the lead singer of Honeyman, which was widely considered one of the best Birmingham bands of the late 90s. He went solo and recorded his debut album with producer Tchad Blake at Peter Gabriel's Real World studio with Jerry Marotta on drums. He released 4 studio albums, including his latest album, 1,000 Winters, and worked with producer Ian Grimble and Thomas Johansen. Many of his songs have been covered by international artists in Italy, France, Norway, and Asia. He's opened for Lionel Richie, Joe Cocker, Arcade Fire, Jackson Browne, The Script, The Chicks, Heather Nova, and many others. And many of his songs have gotten radio play in Norway as well. In his 20s, Jack developed tinnitus or tinnitus and has had chronic tinnitus ever since. He's now a strong advocate for ear protection and offers help and advice for other people suffering from tinnitus as well. Jack was recently a guest for the British Tinnitus Association, speaking for their musician support group, and is author of the book Overcoming Tinnitus, 12 Tools That Have Helped Me Overcome Tinnitus. Thanks so much to James Ivey at Studio Rats for making our introduction. Please welcome Jack Rubinacci to Recording Studio Rockstars. Jack, are you ready to rock, my friend?
I'm ready. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
I'm very excited to be here.
Well, it's exciting to have you here. Thanks for your patience as we got everything all set up for the interview. And
yeah, we did.
And we're about to rock, but I promise we can rock at a quiet volume, which I actually really appreciate doing too.
Yes.
So give us a little bit of an introduction in your own words to who you are. You've obviously had a pretty remarkable journey as a musician. You've released a lot of records. And with Rockstars, we have a playlist in the show notes, so you can click through and go straight to our Spotify playlist or to the YouTube playlist and go check out Jack's music, which is great. And but you have done this remarkable service for all of us of really opening up the dialogue around tinnitus or tinnitus. to help us understand it. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. But give us a bit more introduction into who you are.
Yes, well, I started out like most musicians, sort of wanting to learn how to play songs in my teenage years. My dad's a musician, so when I sort of went to see my dad, I didn't grow up with my dad. He's an Italian musician. He's the piano bar guy you see in these fancy hotels in Rome.
Mm-hmm.
So I was living in Birmingham, and I'd go and see him every now and again when I was about 10, 11, and I'd go and see him play at these really fancy hotels, and I'd fall asleep, next to his piano because he didn't have a babysitter or anything like that. He'd work till 1 o'clock. So in my childhood, I saw what it was like to be a musician, and I heard all these great songs, and I sort of fell in love with the idea of writing songs, really. That's always been my passion. In my early teens, I started in bands, just like, all the other musicians. And by the time I was in my early 20s, I started to get really serious about it. And I joined Honeyman, which, as you mentioned, was a band in Birmingham. And from there, I went solo at 24. I opened for a lot of really nice artists, John Martin and Tom McRae, who are really respected artists in England. And then I eventually moved to Norway, got a Norwegian girlfriend, and took me to here in Drammen, which is 35 minutes outside of Oslo. And from here in my little recording studio, I've sort of written the songs that have been my career. Released my first album at 30 and had Tchad Blake, like you mentioned, Tchad Blake producing at Peter Gabriel's Real World Studios. And from there on, I worked with several of the producers and sort of continued my passion of songwriting and performing live.
That's a pretty remarkable story. I bet that was a lot of fun to work with Tchad as well. He's such a great dude, an amazing set of ears and talent.
Yeah, Tchad is, I have to say, of all the producers I've worked with, his sort of, the memory of working with him sort of shines the brightest because it was such a strange and profound experience for me. Strange because I literally come from, recording demos in my bedroom to, opening the door at Peter Gabriel's Real World. And, there's Tchad Blake and Jerry Marotta, of course, who is an incredible drummer, worked with Peter Gabriel, Tears for Fears, his brother as well, another incredible drummer. So it was a big step forward for me, to be honest with you. It was like being thrown into the very deep end. And Tchad is everything you want him to be, really. He's very sort of, he's on another level when it comes to producing. And I found that very interesting because he produces like an artist. And I think that's sort of the common theme that I've seen with all the producers I've worked with is that, they're like artists in their own right. They just have different tools, So yeah, working with Tchad was a real experience. I learned a lot. I learned to go from, a bedroom sort of, sing-songwriter to that was a big learning experience. And I just so many profound lessons like, go with the spontaneity. It's not about the studio. It's not about the microphones. It's always about the performance. Just small things that might seem obvious to a lot of people listening, but to me, the idea of spontaneity was a big thing. We had this one song called Chinese Whisper, where it's a really hard song. It's one of the better songs on my first album, and it's really hard to play because it's in B, and anybody that plays piano will know that B is not the friendliest key to play in.
It's a tough chord,
and it was quite a complicated part that I was doing. And the reason why it was in B is because I've got an old piano here in my studio, and they couldn't tune it to 440, so they could only tune it to like half a tone down. So I'm playing in C, and it's really easy here in the studio, but back in real world, it was in B. So he wanted to do it live, and I was like, Tchad, I don't think I can do this live. It's playing the piano and singing. I got Jerry Marotta to my left, who's like a beast. He's so precise with everything. So I wasn't sure if I could do it, but we did it. We nailed it, and I think 2 takes, and it's probably one of the best takes on the album. So it's these small things that you sort of learn from a producer, Chad's level.
Yeah, that's a pretty remarkable story. I was just joking that B is a little bit challenging on the guitar too, because it's like you're fretting down on that A string, and it's so close to the end of the neck there. What are some other things that you remember about going from the home studio demo environment and how you would set something up or how you would record to going into a the combination of working with a producer like Tchad, but also being in a pro studio. For example, were you struck by the way that all the microphones were set up differently, or were you struck by the way that they were all kind of set up the same as you would have done at home?
Yeah, that's a really good question. One thing that comes to my mind straight away was we were in this beautiful setting. I mean, Real World is an astounding place. The live room is quite small, but it's beautiful. It's wooden, it's mahogany. But it's quite a small room. The console room is huge. It's massive. And in fact, I just saw that Van Morrison was there the other day, and they set the band up actually in the console room because it's so big. I mean, it must be like 10 meters high, and it's just incredible. And one thing that struck me was that even though we're in this incredible environment, the spirit of the recording was similar to what I would do in my little sort of bedroom studio. And that's one thing that was quite interesting for me because I love spontaneity. I can't stand rehearsing. I can't stand preconceived ideas of stuff. I love being a singer. One of the things I've learned over the years is that often the first take is the best take. And if you can grab the first take, it's the best thing. So one thing that struck me was, and I remember standing in the live room, and it was exactly like you say, they were miking up the piano. Tchad had an assistant called Claire, and I could not believe how many microphones were on this piano. I mean, I'm talking like, I've got a picture of it somewhere, and it's like, I don't know, there must have been like 15 mics on this piano. It was just incredible. And Chad's got his own way of miking things. He's got his own philosophy with these things. But the thing that struck me is that even though we're going to all these incredible lengths, details of, getting microphones exactly where they should be or where Chad thought they should be, the take was always, or the idea of the take was always to get the most spontaneous. And that was something, the contrast of those two things I really enjoyed. Because I like I say, I love taking spontaneity to the extreme, So that's something I really enjoyed working with Chad. And, it's like he would do things that would surprise you. You'd be doing like a run through of a song and he'd say, yeah, I got it. And you'd be like, you got it? He said, yeah, that was a beautiful take. We should keep that take. Let's do another one. But I think that might be the take. It's those sort of things that would make me chuckle because we spent 3 hours setting up these microphones.
Right.
Very specific about the guitar. For example, we had Ron Sexsmith's guitar. Was it Ron Sex? I think it was Peter Gabriel's guitar, but he'd used it on a Ron Sexsmith album. And I'm a massive Ron Sexsmith fan. I mean, huge. I love the guy. So to be having that guitar in my hand, it's Peter Gabriel's guitar, et cetera, and all these microphones around me. And we spent so long setting up, but we did it in 2 takes. I thought that was hilarious,
Yeah.
So that's something that struck me. Also, what struck me was the business side of it all, coming from, and when I say business, I don't actually mean the selling. I mean the importance that was given to the recording. There was schedules, there was time slots for meals, there was meetings and all that sort of thing. That was a strange thing for a guy like me, But I think, the lessons that I take away the most as an artist is sort of his philosophy in the sense that don't be too hung up on perfection because you'll never get it and it never works. And that's not what you're striving for. You're striving for real. And I think that's something that was a beautiful idea. And it was the first time I've come across it. And like I say, to be at that level and to work on those lines are exactly how I think it should work. But not all producers do that. Another thing that I liked working with Chad is that he never made you feel like he had the answers and you didn't. And I think that's something that, as a producer, that is an absolute skill, to be in control of the recording session, but to not make the people that are working with you feel like they are totally useless. And I have had the opposite, to be honest with you. I have had, I've been in other situations where I've been with producers and I'm supposed to be the singer and they're supposed to be the musicians and the producer. And I'm like, that's not how it works. That's not how it works with me, man. You didn't get the memo. I'm not worked like that since I was 60. So that's something that I think if I was to say the thing that I respect the most from that whole recording session and working with Tchad is that you knew that he was in control of everything because you were hearing what was coming out the speakers.
Yeah.
I mean, he was bringing out instruments that I'd never even seen. I mean, I don't even know the name of some of these instruments. And like we had like a Leslie, a rotating Leslie that was on a stand to get a microphone, to get a guitar sound, all these incredible sounds. And you knew this was a guy that was working away in his head to get these sounds, but you never felt like he was, I don't know, he was never belittling the artist or me and the guys that were in the band, and I think that was the best thing that he could have done. That really was, especially a guy coming from my situation. I haven't just sold 10 million records. I'm just the guy from his bedroom sort of thing. So, and that's how you get the best out of the artist. I really can't emphasize that, because if you're working with a guy, especially singers, if you are telling them that they're no good or that it just ruins their flow, it ruins their mojo, man. You can't perform like that.
That's great, man. I love hearing those stories. And I love that you brought up Ron Sexsmith, who I also appreciate a great deal. In fact, I think Secret Heart is one of the greatest songs written, and I've taught it to myself on guitar because it's such a beautiful tune.
You know what? You mentioned Thomas Johansen. Thomas Johansen went to a gig of his, and he was telling me that he is the nicest guy in the world. He was offering to help carry the support band's instruments to the van after he did the headline gig. I mean, the guy's beautiful, man.
Nice. With so many game-changing iZotope plugins to choose from, deciding which one to buy next could be a bit of a challenge. But did you know that now you can have all their plugins through iZotope's affordable subscription bundle, Music Production Suite Pro, for only $19.99 per month? Get your Rockstar extended 30-day free trial subscription now at iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Before your band hits the studio, it's smart to have all the songs and notes in one place. But setting up a shared cloud folder can be frustrating. There's always somebody in the band who can't seem to log in or wants to use a different platform. Not so with Samply. It's easy to add collaborators to a project so the whole band can upload new songs and make comments before the session. Just upload your voice memo or mix and start collaborating. Sign up for your free account with 2 projects now at samplyaudio.com or use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months. Yeah, and I remember Ron and, he had done a record with Tchad years ago. I remember that. Tchad and, I'm blanking right now, but who is it that Tchad was always worked a lot with?
Oh, yeah. I forget his name, but he did also the other producer. What's his name now? Mitchell Froome.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Rockstars. Thank you for being patient. Everybody's like, "Come on, guys, Mitchell Froome." Yeah, cool stuff. A lot of great records being made by those guys.
Yes.
So it's cool to hear you talk about that. So like this idea of like, don't try and achieve perfection, and also, that the setting up all these microphones in advance. It's like letting the technical work be something that gets done ahead of time so that when it's time to record the music, you can capture a moment, right when it happens. Yeah. And that those things can be different. Like you can take lots of time to set up the technical things ahead of time if you want, but you don't want to take lots of time necessarily to record the music. You want to let it be spontaneous, as you said.
Yeah.
And that is a tricky thing to do. And it's one of the things that I really love about tracking sessions with bands is I loved the way there was all this hustle and you almost achieve this pinnacle moment where the performance happens and you just hope you captured it. I mean, hopefully you're not hoping you captured it. Hopefully you did capture it, but then it's all leading towards that one moment.
Yeah. You know what? It's funny you say that because I made one mistake with Tchad and I never forget it. It's one of those moments that you never forget. We were about to go into the live room and we discussed what we were going to do. And again, it was all along the lines of, keep it spontaneous. And I remember clapping my hands and say, right, let's make magic. And it was something that Tchad didn't like. He was like, no, we're not trying to make magic. We're not trying to get perfection. We're trying to get the right take. And it took me a while to understand what that meant. And I think I understand. I think I understood it later. Is having this preconceived idea of what you think is going to happen, it takes away the possibilities of magic actually happening.
Yeah.
And I really believe in that, man. And I tell you why. Because as a singer, I mean, like I say, I was quite naive then, but as I've grown into the role of a singer over the years, I sort of know that you can't preconceive this stuff. You can't aim at this stuff. You got to just let it all go, and you got to leave nothing on the floor, leave nothing on the table. You got to go for it with your spirit and your soul. And that's something that I think was what he was trying to say. He was trying to say, don't go with a preconceived idea, just do it, and do it to your best of ability, and do it raw and do it real. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I have grown into over the years as a singer. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think that when I think about going into the studio with the band, there are so many times where somebody tries to envision what this thing is. And I agree with you. I feel like you set everything up and you get this thing, and then you don't plan it and make it happen. You discover it.
Yeah.
In the moment, you get everything going. But part of that too, that's so important, is remembering that in order to really truly discover something, you also have to show up in that moment ready to deliver everything you've got. Like you put yourself on the line, like this is the one. Never like the next one's going to be the one, or two after that is going to be the one.
So can I add something there that I think is quite an interesting angle this conversation is going down? I recently did a video on my YouTube about what makes a great singer. And it got picked up by a big website. I can't remember what they're called now. But yeah, it got picked up, and they said if they could. And I was like, why is this video getting picked up? And I had my philosophy in the video was, the reason why we love artists so much, and we often forgive artists a lot of, ego or whatever, is because they're rare things. And when I say artists, I don't mean singers, I mean, musicians as a whole, great musicians or songwriters that we like. I think that what makes them great, if you forgive all the ego and all the insecurities that they might have, is that deep down, they leave nothing. They leave nothing on the table when they press record. If I'm thinking about Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, all the people that we all look up to, and we each have our own individual preferences, but we can all agree that these are, Lennon, McCartney, et cetera, we can agree that these are exceptional artists.
Yeah.
And I think it's because no matter what they say or what they do in their life, when it comes to that red light in the studio, they leave nothing. And I think what makes a great singer, or what makes a great guitarist and a producer to a certain extent, are people that can access that deep well within them. It's a deep well of pain, of insecurities, of childhood memories, whatever it is that is your inspiration. It can be happy memories, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be pain, but it's often pain. And if you can access that well within you, if you're doing a guitar solo, I see it from a vocal because I'm a vocalist, but if you can access it and you can get it down without any reservations, not letting anything, because it's a strange thing with a vocal and with a guitar. I'm thinking guitar solos and vocal. Yeah. People can sense the truth, and it's a really strange thing. They can sense it without even knowing that they're sensing it. When you hear Lennon, when you hear Kurt Cobain, when you hear Amy Winehouse, you sort of subconsciously know you're listening to some profound truth that's coming from deep within them. And you don't even know it. You just think, wow, what a great vocal. And I think what makes great artists, is people that can access that well, whatever it is, pain, whatever that might be. If you can access it and not have any reservations about putting it down. Because when you listen to Amy Winehouse, I love Amy Winehouse. I think she's incredible. And Ron Sexsmith, talking about Ron Sexsmith, that, for example, do you know the song Pretty Little Cemetery? That's one of my absolute, I think it's so beautiful, man. I play that nonstop. Or even Tracy Chapman. My favorite album of all time is Tracy Chapman. My mum brought that album home when I was about, 12. And I thought it was the most depressing album. Me and my mate, we used to think you need a bottle of vodka and a shot of some sort of drug just to get through the album, But when I was older, I just totally became obsessed with it. And I think it's because she accesses something deep inside of her. And this is the important part. She doesn't hold back. And I think that the reason why so few people are able to do that, or so few people people struggle with that, and I did as well. I on my first album, I struggled to do it. Now I don't. I just let it all out. I think the reason why people struggle to get there, to that point, is because it's often quite painful. It's often hard to get to that level of emotion without going too far. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much to talk about there. And I'm thinking about my more limited experience singing on records, on my own record, and that trying to strike that balance between what happens in those first take moments, where as a singer you might look at it and go, oh, well, I didn't get that, that's not right, this is out of tune, I can do that better, and balancing that against doing more takes and comping it together to where you've created something that hits all those points where you're like, okay, this has got everything I need. But then, do you even have a perspective now of whether or not it's ultimately a take that's worth listening to, without all the character and the personality? And it's so great to have somebody there working with you, someone like Tchad Blake, who's able to listen and respond in that moment and go, I loved what I heard. And then that might be enough of the measure right there. So very cool stuff. Let's pivot back just a little bit, because this is all awesome, but I want to make sure we give enough time to talk about this book you've written and this service that you're providing for all of us to talk about, the T word in the studio. So give us an introduction to what is tinnitus and tinnitus. Maybe, I'm sure you've told this story many times, so you've got a way to do that. But if you want to introduce us to how you were introduced to it, and we can start there.
Yeah. 27. I was 27, did a little recording in my bedroom. I woke up the next day exhausted. 3 days, I just couldn't move. And then, after about 3 or 4 days, I started to hear a faint sound. I knew what it was. I knew it wasn't going to go away. I was scared. I was emotional, but I made my first mistake, and that was I didn't do anything. I just carried on.
Mm-hmm.
So from 27 to about 35, no earplugs. When I was 35,
and
I was
let me preface this: you were playing a lot of gigs, right?
Yeah.
So this is
lots of gigs,
not
no
so
earplugs,
much studio
recording.
time.
Made my first album at 30. We didn't even mention earplugs. And in fact, that's, if I take it back a little bit more, when I was in the band Honeyman, we used to rehearse in a band in a room the size of a cupboard. It really was. It was about 2.5 meters wide and about 6 meters long. And I had PA, 2 guitar amps, very, very loud drummer, bass amp. It was very, very loud. And we didn't use earplugs. This is 98. So nobody in my circle was talking about earplugs. And it was also pre-internet. So you couldn't sort of do your own sort of research, and not like you can now. So I was naive. I thought it was rock and roll. I thought it was tough. 27, it came. Then when I was about 35, I needed to do more work because I'd become a father. And, I just generally needed more work, more income. So I was taking any job that could come along. I was doing all sorts of gigs. One night I'd be opening for the Chicks at Oslo Spectrum. And the next night I'd be in a small room doing whatever. I was just taking any gig I could get. And about 36, 37, it was getting really bad. Started wearing earplugs. And by the time I was 40, it was getting really, really, it was becoming a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
So to bring it up to date, I had some other issues with my health, and I overcame them. And when I overcame them, when I got given the clear, I nearly went blind in my right eye. And when I got the clear on that, I felt an immense sense of gratitude. When you get over something like that, I nearly went blind in my right eye, and it was just a big emotional experience.
Yeah.
They managed to save it. And when I came out of hospital, I just felt this huge sense of love. And I was like, I want to get back to work. I want to work night and day. I want to give. So the first thing I did was I made a video on YouTube talking about my experiences with tinnitus. It was the first time that I'd really opened up about it because I was embarrassed. I thought I would lose work. I thought I'd lose income. But like I say, this sort of sense of love and just wanting to give sort of took over. So I made this video and it got immediate reaction. Loads of musicians started getting in touch. The British Tinnitus Association got in touch. And I just kept getting loads of messages on Instagram and comments on the video. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? How has it been with this? And I was like, whoa, I didn't know that there was all these people out there that were sort of maybe not as far down the line as I am because I have chronic tinnitus, but maybe there's a lot of people worried about this, like a lot. I'm telling you, man, there's a lot of people really emotional and worried about this. So I was like, well, look, maybe I should put a book together and sort of list my experiences and, tell people that you can do this. You're going to be okay, but you've got to be strong and you've got to be proactive. So I put this book together. I showed it to my girlfriend. She said, yeah, it's great, but you got to take all this music stuff out. And I was like, what do you mean? It's like, she says, yeah, but half the people reading this book, Overcoming Tinnitus, they're going to be carpenters, business people. They're not going to care that you've got, 85 dB on stage or that you use this sort of mixing technique. Why would they care about that? So I took all the music stuff out and it became a better book for that. But then I looked at the music stuff and I was like, hold on a minute. This is good information. If I'd have got this information 5 years ago when my tinnitus got chronic, I would have really appreciated it. 5 years ago when my tinnitus got really bad, there wasn't much on YouTube. I got to tell you, there wasn't much on YouTube. I found one guy, a guitarist, that was talking a little bit about it. The person that I am is the kind of guy, I contacted him because that's just the way I am. I said, hey man, I'm going through a really bad patch, any tips? And he's like, yeah, you'll be all right. And he didn't really want to engage with the conversation. The only person that I found was, it was not much on about musicians with tinnitus. I found an article with some DJs talking about it because there's a lot of DJs out there that have got bad tinnitus. So I contacted this DJ on Instagram and I said, look, I just want to let you know that article you put out meant a lot to me. I was emotional. You've given me strength. He got back in touch with me. And I couldn't believe it because he's a really well-known DJ, international, doing gigs all over the place. And he was, literally at the airport and said, look, if you want to talk, here's my telephone number. I never called him, but it meant the world to me. It was so big for me to think that there's another brother out there doing it, and he's doing it, and he's okay. So all these things were in my mind when I sort of divided these two books. And I said, you know what? I'm going to put two books out. One called Overcoming Tinnitus for general people, and another one, A Musician with Tinnitus, 14 Tools that help me perform and cope, so that musicians can get hold of that. And I find now that the both books sell equally, but I get messages from all sorts of people, and I'm constantly getting. I get a lot of messages every week asking my advice about this, and it's just amazing. I got to tell you, man, I appreciate you having me on this podcast because there are not many people talking about this, and I really wish there were because this is a pandemic that's happening. Like I speak to professionals, people that actually know what they're talking about, and they're like, we predict there's going to be a massive problem with this, with the teenagers coming through with the headphones, that they reckon it's going to get really bad in the next few years, So yeah. I'm so glad that, people like yourself are giving this, some space.
This show is sponsored by Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can go to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level. And you can start right now with my free Introduction to Mixing course, Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is that these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, or look for the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. The first time I heard a Carl Tatz Phantom Focus mix room featuring the PFM HD1000 master reference monitors, I was blown away. It was like listening to 3D holographic audio where I could reach out and touch the instruments with rock solid bass down to 20 hertz. It was awesome. And now I've got one of my very own at the Toy Box Studio in East Nashville. What's amazing is that the Phantom Focus system can be implemented in your existing control room too, or even your bedroom studio, giving you world-class sound. Go see how cool your studio could look and sound at phantomfocus.com. Well, I appreciate you coming on to talk about this. I understand, that there's this correlation between live performance and experiencing tinnitus. I might go back to saying tinnitus because that's what I'm so used to saying.
Yeah.
But because the stage is so loud and because the really amps get turned up. I mean, I've been there. I remember, having a jam session in college and everything was incredibly loud in this room and I had the amp turned all the way up and I couldn't even hear my guitar coming out of it barely,
Wow.
And I remember going to shows and wanting to go up and stand in front of the main speakers at these, medium-sized clubs.
Yeah.
And you get lost in that sound. And I think some of the challenges are recognizing why do we go there in the first place? What is it about the situations that are so risky that draw us to them? So for example, when I was in architecture school, there was another kid who would put his headphones on and crank them up insanely loud. And I just remember thinking like, oh, that's kind of cool, and then I'd do it some. And also being on stage and playing guitar, as a guitar player, you become intimately familiar with the fact that your guitar needs a certain amount of power to sound right to you.
Yeah.
And it becomes very difficult. Like my level of insecurity would go up exponentially, in the opposite direction, depending on the volume of my guitar. If you listen to the sound guy who says, you got to turn the amps down, then my fear of sucking at guitar went up in reverse,
Totally. Yeah.
So I think these are things that we should talk about. But where I'm headed with this is it's one thing to talk about it with the live performance, but my God, people they're pretty, you're right. People are pretty scared to talk about it in the studio because in the studio, as engineers, whether we're recording and mixing or whether we're doing mastering or even just production or whatever, we like to think that, we've got this, set of golden ears ideally, and we have the ability to hear all this stuff. We want to be like the pair of really high-end speakers that you can turn to when you need to really know what's accurate. And so it's scary and nobody really wants to talk about it or address it too much because, nobody who wants to put themselves out there as having something potentially wrong with their ears, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think the truth is it's prevalent. I think it's all over the place. And I think that there's a lot you're going to share with us now about living with it and managing it. But I think it's good for us to recognize that if you're sensing any level of noise or background noise or ringing or any of those things, these are all real issues for studio people as well as for the live musician. And it's high time we address it. And it's high time we deal with it. It's high time that it gets acknowledged. And I think more importantly, it's high time we realize that it's not an impassable obstacle. Like you can have some of this and deal with it and still make great, amazing records. It doesn't have to stop you in your tracks.
Can I come in there?
Yeah, please do. Please do.
So, because you made some great points, and thank you for making them. Because like I say, to give this space is what I think is an important thing. So, they did a study here in Norway. 37.8% of rock musicians suffer from significant hearing loss. 37.8% of all rock musicians.
Wow.
20% of the rock musicians that they did this study on, and it was quite a big study. 20%, 20, are going to suffer chronic tinnitus. That means if there's 2 bands backstage and those bands happen to have 5 members each, 2 of those guys, and that's a lot, 2 of those guys are going to suffer life-changing chronic tinnitus. That's how widespread it is. Another thing I'd like to say, I've been thinking about this a lot, obviously, because I can't listen to loud music anymore. And I used to be the worst. I used to crank it up. I used to love it, man. I used to, in my car, the first thing I'd do if I'd get a secondhand car when I was a kid, the first thing I'd do is swap the speakers out,
Yeah.
I used to love it. I'd, be driving around with rock music on. I come from a rock music background. And I'd go to clubs like yourself, and I just loved it, man. And I've been thinking about this because I have a daughter now that's 16, and I'm trying to tell her in a way that's not going to bring her anxiety, but I'm trying to explain to her that her father is someone who is a big advocate for tinnitus. So could she please be aware of sound with her AirPods? But I've noticed something, and this is something that I find interesting. We like loud music because it is like a drug. It is like it gives us so many endorphins, so many good feelings when we feel that bass hit, when we feel the bass drum, the vocal, the top end, even distortion, feedback. It brings out a sort of an animal instinct within us, and it's exciting. I've been there, man. I mean, all the bands I've seen, I've been there. It's really, really exciting. The problem with all this is, and it goes to the fundamental problem, we treat our ears as if they were an old hammer that we'd found in the garage that's been around for 300 years. Maybe your granddad used to use this hammer and it's still rock solid. There's not a dent in this thing. We use our ears as if it were like that. But the reality of it is, when you look into the mechanics of what is an ear, what makes the components of an ear, it is more like a priceless violin that you could never replace.
Wow.
It is a beautiful work of art, really. It is incredibly sensitive, and we hear so many things that we don't even know that we hear, but that's how sensitive and how incredible the ear actually is. And it should be treated in the same way, but we don't. And look, man, I'm the worst. This is why I'm in this position in the first place, because I was the guy that, when I'd do a final mix, or I'd get a final mix from a producer, I used to crank that up, man. And, I'd make the walls shake. So that's where it comes from. I think it's like a drug. And the problem with someone like me is, because I'm aware of it now, I see it everywhere. I see these kids today, they love to crank it up to the point where it's outrageous. And I don't want to bring it down on the whole thing, because, 20% get it, but 80% don't. So, your chances are pretty good. But I think it's really great that we bring in this conversation just so that people have the option to sort of protect themselves.
Yeah.
And also, it's hard for being in the studio in that situation, because you do have to put yourself in a particular situation. For example, I was in London before lockdown. I was in London doing this video. We were doing a video for a big software company. I was with the Studio Rats, actually. I was with Paul and I was with James from the Studio Rats. And we were doing this video, and it was all high-end stuff in a beautiful recording studio in London. And we did our bits, and it came time for the playback. And I said to the producer, who was quite a well-known guy, I can't remember his name now, but he'd done a lot of stuff. And I said to him, I'm going to sit this out. I'll be in the artist area when you guys go through the playback. And I sort of explained my situation, because I knew what was going to happen. When you go into the playback, everybody's excited, everybody's really, really pumped up, and the first thing that happens is the volume goes pretty much close to max.
Yeah.
So it is incredibly hard, and that's why one of the things that I talk about in the book is be open and honest. Because I tell you, man, it changed my life. It changed my life because it allows me to work. This is the only way I'm allowed to work, because when I work with people, I say, I'm going to give you the best performance I can. I'm going to give you the best mix I can. I'm going to give you everything that I've got, but we have to work at low volumes. And when you are honest like that, it just takes the stress off your shoulders, because you can go, okay, now they're aware of it. And hopefully, they'll be sort of conscious of it, and most people are, because most people know, it's the luck of a draw. It's like my dad is a musician. He's been a musician his entire life. He's been, like I say, he's the piano bar guy. You go into these hotels, he's the guy you see in the corner playing piano. And I tell you, he's had a speaker about a meter from his head for the past 50 plus years. And when I talk to him about this and I say, hey, Pop, I'm sort of really going big on, telling people about the situation. He's like, what? Oh, you mean that thing again, that ringing? Oh, man, you still got that? Have you not tried putting olive oil in your ear or something? And I'm like, because he's Italian, right? So it's the luck of the draw. But I would suggest for people to be honest about it,
Yeah, no, I think that's great, because it's like you don't want to be the one who's doing something weird. So like for me, doing something weird is, which I do now, is at first going into even a loud bar with loud voices and people just talking. We don't necessarily realize it, but that's too loud, that's too loud. Yeah. That's enough to cause tinnitus. And, it would seem weird to put in earplugs when there's no band playing and there's no music going on. But I've learned to go ahead and do that. And there's a lot of little tricks we can talk about here on the show about how to manage stuff. So for example, one is, for me, always have foam earplugs in my pocket if I can. If I'm going out, I grab earplugs. I don't even know where we're going. I just know I might need them, and I don't want to have to tough it out in a night in a bar that's too loud, or with music with a PA that's too loud. So I'll just have the foam earplugs in. Another benefit about putting the foam earplug in is, once you teach yourself to actually not only get used to the sound of having earplugs in, but actually prefer it over not having earplugs in, then now when that person wants to, have you ever noticed how people love to lean in your ear and talk louder than everything else because they really want you to hear what they got to say? Now with a foam earplug in, I just lean my head over and let them talk in my ear, and it's okay. It's not so loud that it bothers me. So that's a real benefit there. But there's some other things, like in the studio as an engineer, the loudest time of making a record for me is the overdub time. So it's when there's a guitar overdub being done in the control room, and you really just have to, again, the guitar player needs to feel it a little bit, I think there's a lot of times where I actually turn it up more than was even necessary. Like the guitar player probably would have been fine at a lower volume, but doing rock and roll, I instinctively think it needs to be cranked to feel it. And as an engineer, you're that much closer to the speaker. You're closer to the speaker that's so loud than the guitar player even is. But that's one of the things where I learned to get up out of the seat and go to the back of the room, even set up my laptop as a remote for the studio computer, so that I can actually press play and record from 8 feet away, 10 feet away from the speaker, and let the guitar player be closer. Anyway, I'm just riffing. This stuff's so important, and I got so much to say about it. Yeah, you jump in.
Can I add a couple of things?
Yeah, please do.
So when I first started wearing earplugs, I was in the school of thought that I need to feel it. I need to hear it to feel it. So I need it loud. So the first thing I'd say to the sound guy is, could you turn my vocal up? And he'd be like, yeah, but it's really loud. I'm like, no, I need more vocal. When my situation got really bad, I learned to lower the volume, and I learned to train my brain to not need that volume, to still be able to give the same performance, but to not give the same volume on stage. Like the first thing I do when I do a gig, the first thing I do is I go to talk to the sound guy, and I say, hey, I'm the guy that's opening, or if it's a big venue and I'm opening for someone, hey, I'm opening, my name's Jack. So I introduce myself and make some sort of contact with the sound guy, because it always amazes me the amount of bands that just walk into a venue and don't say hello to the crew. That's always blown my mind,
Right.
So I introduce myself, and I tell them, could you please turn the monitors off? And they go, off? I said, yeah, I'm sort of in the in this position, and you turn them off. So they turn them off, and I can set up without feeling there's going to be clicks and pops and that sort of stuff, because one click or one pop, and that can ruin my performance. So I turn them off, and then I bring them in at increments of like, 2 or 3. I say, can you give me like, 1/4? Can you give me half? And then I normally feel like if I need more vocal, it's mostly insecurity, like as you were mentioning earlier on, because being a singer, that's the thing for me. So that's one tip. Another thing as well is that I have several pairs of earplugs just to get sort of useful information out there to folks. I have 4 sets of earplugs. I have one in my car keys, one in my wallet, one by the mixing desk, and one in my gig bag. Because when I bought the first pair of really good earplugs, I was really proud of myself. But the first thing I did was forget them after a few gigs, and I can't be in that position anymore. So it's an idea to get, a few pairs. They don't cost that much money. You can get all sorts. Even the foam ones are really good, but just something. And for me, being, like you said, it makes you just relax a bit more and you feel a bit more. And I feel that totally. I feel like if I'm in a venue where it's even like a restaurant where it's really loud, the position that I'm in, I feel more comfortable if I've got a pair of comfortable earplugs in. And again, being honest about it, when people say, "What's that in your ear?" I say, it's earplug. It just helps me relax. And again, being honest, it helps me a lot. So I just wanted to add those couple of points to the points you made.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I apologize. I've gotten so excited hearing your story and wanting to respond. I don't think we've necessarily done a great job of defining what is tinnitus. So let's do that before we take a break here, and let the rock stars know what is tinnitus and how would you know to recognize it if it starts to appear?
Yeah, so it's any sort of noise that is not there that you hear. So if you're in a quiet room and you're hearing whooshing, for me, it's a constant tone. It's just a constant tone that I hear. It gets louder over the years, but it started quite faint. So any noise that you hear that is not actually happening in the room that you're in, then you are having some issues with your ears. The first question that always comes to mind, and the question that people ask me all the time, is it going to go away? In some cases, it does. So if you get it, it doesn't mean that you've got it. It might be temporary. And in a lot of cases, it is temporary. I think we've all had that where, your ears ring for a couple of days and then it goes away. But if that happens to you, I would suggest it's a signal, it's a warning for you to sort of be a bit more proactive with protecting your ears and be a bit more conscious of it. And I really like that idea that you had where you move away from the speakers. I think that's brilliant because it becomes a game of reducing the volume that's coming into your ears. Imagine that your ears are like a whale. And if you've got when the whales go sort of eating or hunting, they open their mouths and they just swallow 1,000 little fishes,
Right.
Well, that's sort of what our ears are like. You're just swallowing all this sound and there's no protection to it whatsoever. You're just totally vulnerable. Whereas if you become a little bit more aware of sound, and for example, I have this was a brilliant thing. On the same recording session that I was in London, one of the crew showed me their Apple Watch. I didn't have an Apple Watch at the time. And he said, "Jack, you got to see this. There's an Apple Watch. It's the 5 or the 6 or whatever. It's got a sound meter on the clock face." I was hold on a minute. Whoa. Take that back and say, "You tell me you got a sound meter on your watch?" He says, "Dude, it's brilliant. I've done some research. This Apple Watch is within 1 dB of some of the most expensive $2,000 sound meter equipment that's out there, the specific sound meters. This Apple Watch is within 1 or 2 dB max within that range for accuracy. And I got it on my watch. So if you are sort of concerned about your ears, maybe look at a sound meter on your phone, on your Apple Watch. Check out what sort of sound levels you're comfortable with. I'm comfortable around 40, 45, 50, 55. I'm okay. It gets to like 60, 65. I'm starting to feel, okay, can we bring it down a bit? Most mixers will mix at 80 dB. Like I talk to mixers and they're like, "Jack, how do you mix at like 50 dB? And I'm like, do you know what? I mix at 50 dB, 52, whatever. And actually I mix better because I'm not riding on the wave of the sound. Just like when I'm doing a vocal, I don't need it loud anymore to cover my insecurities. And I hear so much clearer. I hear so much more detail in the sound because I'm not vibing to the volume. I'm actually focusing 100% on what's actually going on in the mix." I read this thing. I saw this video and I don't know if it's true, man. I don't know if this is true, but I heard this thing where Chris Lord Alge, he mixes at such low volume that if his assistant is on his keyboard tapping away on a computer keyboard, it bugs him. He gets distracted by that noise because that's the volume that he's mixing at. That to me tells me that he, maybe I'm wrong, man. I may be totally wrong.
No, I think that's
Anybody
accurate.
who's worked with him might disagree, or they'll let me know. But I reckon he mixes at very, very low volumes.
Yeah,
and
I think
this is
true.
Chris Lord Alge. You know what I mean? So I think that turning up the volume is an insecurity. So yes, any sound that you hear in your ear that doesn't go away after 3 or 4 days is signs of tinnitus. It doesn't mean it's going to stay. The first thing you should do is not panic. You're going to be okay. Whatever stage you are with your tinnitus, you will be okay. But yes, sorry, I was a bit of a long-winded answer, but that's what tinnitus is.
So you just finished an awesome mix and sent it off to the band, but the singer texts you with lyric changes, the drummer emails you wanting a different fill, and the bass player DMs you about a wrong note in the chorus. But which mix version were they talking about anyway? Don't you wish there was an easier way? Samply comes to the rescue as your ultimate mix assistant, streaming high-quality mixes so that your clients can easily listen and send notes from their mobile phone on the road or the computer back at the studio. All mix comments are time-stamped directly onto the correct mix version with no confusion, and everything is easy to find in one location. No more missed mix messages from the band. Phew! Sign up for your free account with 2 projects now at samplyaudio.com and use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off for the first 3 months when you're ready to upgrade. Look, I love using iZotope plugins for my music and podcast productions. In fact, you're hearing Ozone and RX on my voice in this podcast episode. And now you can get access to all the iZotope plugins through the subscription bundle. For only $19.99 per month, Music Production Suite Pro is designed for the serious recording, mixing, and mastering engineer, putting the finishing touches on music, film, and podcasts with fully pro versions of Ozone, RX, Neutron, Nectar, Neoverb, Tonal Balance Control, Visual Mixer, and more, including free plugin updates. And just for you rock stars, get an extended 30-day free trial subscription at iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Coupon not valid for subscription. Hey rockstars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Jack Rubinacci, joining us from the distant land of Norway, I believe. And we are talking about tinnitus and what it is and how to manage it so that you can make great records for the rest of your life. Let's jump right in. Jack, you ready to jam?
Yep.
All right, dude. So one of the things I wanted to start off by saying was I love hearing about the Apple Watch and having a sound level meter. I think that is really important because I remember discovering a sound level meter. I think the first one I got, which I still have, is just the classic Radio Shack, big honking one with a 9-volt battery in it. But our phones also have apps. So if you have an iPhone, Rockstars, there's an app called Audio Tools that has an SPL meter in it. And it is really remarkable to start holding that up in different situations and go, oh, I had no idea that the car window being down as I drove on the highway here is already like too loud for a length of time, things like that. So that's really cool. What do you want to talk about next? I mean, you've written this wonderful book called, 12 Tools for Helping You Manage Tinnitus, Overcoming Tinnitus, 12 Tools That Help Me Overcome Tinnitus. Do you want to break some of that down, or do you want to leap around a little bit more and just talk about, real world situations where you can do something rather than letting the tinnitus do something to you?
I think it might be because I sort of get a lot of feedback from people, specifically musicians, and I'm sort of conscious of what's on their mind. Maybe we can sort of go through some advice if there is anybody who's worried about it.
Let's definitely do it. I promise you, we've got listeners that are dying to know whether they should be worried about this or what they can do to avoid it, or just, deal with it.
Yeah. So the first thing that I would say to anybody out there listening is, if you're at your first sort of steps with this, I want to let you know that you're going to be okay. Because like I say, when I was sort of back against the wall five years ago, I couldn't really find many people saying that you're going to be okay. And I just want to let people know that, you're going to be fine. It's not easy, but you're going to be fine. But there's a couple of things that I would really recommend people to do. The first thing is to be proactive. Proactive is a really big word in my life because I have to be proactive. There's been several situations in my life where if I hadn't have been proactive, I would be in a lot of trouble. And tinnitus is one of those situations. You've got to, if you are out there and you have had a noise in your ear for more than, say, 4 or 5 days or a week, then you might be someone with tinnitus. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I have no medical background whatsoever, so I don't know anything about the medical side of it, but you might be someone with tinnitus. And if that's the case, the first thing that I would suggest is to not panic. And if you've had it for a while, one thing that I found was a big step for me was to actually recognize that I am a person with tinnitus, because that's sort of a big bridge to cross. And it's an important bridge to cross because what it does is that you start changing your life accordingly. If you don't cross that bridge, you risk the hazard of sort of, oh, I've got this noise in my ear and, it's going to be okay. The problem with that is that, it's better to be proactive is what I'm trying to say. So if you recognize yourself as someone with tinnitus, then you can change your life accordingly. And that wasn't easy for me, but I managed to do it. So being proactive is a big thing. And what does that mean? It means, well, taking care of your ears, using earplugs in most situations. But the thing with tinnitus is that it's very much also a mental game. And, you can sort of shut down when your tinnitus gets bad, you can sort of shut down. You don't want to go anywhere. You don't want to do anything. I think that's not a good thing to do. I think the better thing to do, or the thing that I found that helped me, was to try and adapt my life. And it takes big steps. It means reducing stress. That's a big thing. Reducing stress is an absolutely huge thing for me. I cut out anything that I feel is not gaining me benefit, but is still stressful. I reduce my stress a lot. Exercise. It's a lot of things that are sort of outside the box of tinnitus. So you say, well, what's exercise or these things got to do with tinnitus? Well, actually, they all add up to help you get through that situation. So, exercise, being open about it, talking to people.
Can I ask you a question? You
don't necessarily have to tell people in the industry if you don't want to do that, because that's entirely your decision, and because that can affect people's income and stuff like that. So I don't want to make any sort of suggestion in that area because that's entirely the individual's choice. I chose to be honest about it, but it's up to the individual. But telling your family and stuff like that, it just helps relieve the burden. So these are sort of steps that you can take. Your diet, sleep, all these things can help you because it strengthens your mind. And when your mind is strengthened, you can sort of deal with things. It's like Nietzsche says. He says, where there is a why, you can put up with any how. I really live by that idea, especially because my tinnitus is quite bad. Where there is a why, you can put up with any how. So where there is a reason, where there is a goal, you can put up with it. Like, for example, with me in my situation, realistically, I should probably give up music. I'm being honest with you. I'm done with trying to make it look pretty. I should probably give up music. That's how bad my ears are. But I love music so much. I love songwriting so much. I love hearing the end results, the final mix so much that I'm not going to. So I change my life accordingly. So these are some of the steps that people that are worried about it can take,
Can I interject a question related to the exercise?
Sure.
So, and apologies if I'm interrupting a little bit as I try and jump in, but What about alcohol and caffeine, coffee?
Yeah.
I didn't see that listed, but I know that that can be one of the things that can either exacerbate tinnitus, or worse yet, for me, alcohol in the studio was one of the first things I had to sort of stop doing, because I realized that it was causing me to relax too much and get too loud and just kind of ignore what was going on.
Yeah.
But I do remember being in my 20s and the first time realizing, oh, I've got tinnitus now. I'm going to have to deal with it. This is just going to be part of life in the studio. And like you said, learning that it was okay, that you're not alone, that everything will be all right. That was a huge help for me, because I had some mentors around who just said, oh, it's fine. You know, you're going to be fine. It's just part of the deal. You know, just be careful and everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I love that. I love that. And I think that's at the heart of everything that I try and say to people, because it can get very difficult. And I saw this TV show the other day. There's an English presenter called Michael Palin. He's a very famous, a very, very well-loved presenter in England. He was actually in the Monty Python comedy series.
Oh, right on.
Anyway, he's a beautiful guy, and he said something that I picked up on because I sort of do. He was filming this travel show, and it was a very difficult show to film back in the 90s, and he said he got ill. And he said, I dealt with it the way that I always deal with things in life. I just got on with it. That was beautiful to me. I love that. I love that philosophy. I've found inspiration from people like that. So you mentioned mentors. I sort of have tried to find my own mentors, and they're the usual people, like Muhammad Ali and stuff like that. I know it sounds a bit out of the box, but
yeah,
I find that when you research great sportsmen, great artists, etc., you find that actually, because we see the end result, we see Muhammad Ali winning, and we see Muhammad Ali, the great Muhammad Ali. What we don't often see is all the hard work, the suffering, the overcoming that he had to do to get where he was. Or any great, like I read a quote from Roger Federer, and it's these small quotes that give me strength. He said, part of being a professional is learning how to play through the pain. And, it's these sort of things that made me emotional, because I'm like, brother, I hear you, man. I hear you totally loud and clear, So, yes, I think the idea of just getting on with it is a good one. And it's a funny thing with tinnitus, because it's very much a mental game. If you focus, and it's like one of the things I mentioned in my book is don't obsess, because when you obsess about it, it will only make it worse. When you get on with things and say, you know what, I got this, it's going to be okay. I'm going to look after my health. I'm going to look after my exercising, etc. I'm going to be okay. When you get your head around that sort of philosophy, your tinnitus all of a sudden becomes less of a burden. You're like, I can deal with this, man. I'm going to be fine. I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to get myself strong mentally and physically. But getting back to caffeine, this is why tinnitus is so complicated, because some things trigger some people and some things don't. Like caffeine doesn't necessarily trigger me. And thank God, because I love caffeine, man. I'm half Italian, and, a cappuccino in the morning is a must.
I got coffee going right now in a mug.
Yeah. Alcohol, I don't get triggered by it, but I totally know what you mean about, relaxing with alcohol and wanting to hear my favorite music. And I don't necessarily want to hear it quiet, so I have to be careful. I have to be careful with that too.
Yeah. Alcohol just kind of relaxes me. And so it might relax my natural tendency to be more careful around a loudspeaker. I've also heard that physically, so the ear, I think one way, again, we're not doctors, so we don't have to get too deep into this, but I do know that the ear is a combination of the mechanical and the mental, right? So,
yeah.
So there's a mechanical aspect to the ear that is the way it moves and the way, the sound bounces off the eardrum and moves the small bones that resonate our cochlea and make the fluid move around, and which moves the little tiny hairs in our ear, all of which give us the frequency response. But there's also a protective membrane. So like when a loud sound happens, our ear can actually tighten physically to protect ourselves from loud sounds. And I have heard that drinking an alcohol relaxes that muscle because it's a muscle relaxant, and that actually slows down our natural physical protective element for the ear. And then on the mental side, those are the things that I hear you talking about, where once the electrical information comes in from our ear into our nervous system, then it's a question of a mental process of like, how do we take in this information? What do we do with it? How do we interact with it? And I think that, exercise is a combination of physical and mental, control, but also meditation, for example, is a real focusing on the mental aspect and learning to not let the, the background noise that is coming into your brain amplify or start to bother you. The more we focus on it, the more, we can increase the volume of tinnitus. And for me in my 20s, tinnitus was finishing studio sessions. And, actually rewind a little more. I totally had the experiences where I'd play too loud. I'd have the ringing in the ears after the show. And I was like, whoa, dude, are your ears ringing? Oh, that's so wild. Whoa. And then it goes away, hopefully by the morning. But later in the studio, it was like waking up after a session and realizing I just had sort of like a shh kind of background noise thing down there, and first realizing it. And then, it's like, do you start freaking out about it, or how do you deal with it? So I'll turn it back over to you, but these are all really, really great things for you to be talking about and, helping us with these tools for managing.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? I love all this because I think it's on an uplifting, positive vibe. And generally I think the vibe of it is that you can do this, it's going to be fine. And I love that. But I like to say what it comes back to is being proactive. And I want to share something with you, man. I want to tell you that the battles that I've had with tinnitus, and they've been quite profound. I got to be honest with you. There's been some pretty tough times. They've made me a better person. They've made me a better musician, a better singer, and certainly a better songwriter. Because when I'm singing a song called "Don't Let Go," I got a song called "Don't Let Go." I'm singing from the heart, man. I'm not, I'm not messing. So I have become better because of it. I think we are the sum of our battles, and this has been a big battle for me. But talking about meditation, talking about sort of finding inner peace and stuff like that, it's made me a better person because of that, because I appreciate what I've got. I appreciate, like, if you can flip it around, man, if you can learn to flip this around, you're going to be okay. And when I speak to musicians, and I can generally tell from the vibe of the message they send me, I can sense where they are along their journey, because ultimately you're going to be okay. So the bottom line is you're going to be fine. Don't worry, you're going to be fine. But you've got to get to that point of realizing that you're going to be fine. And a lot of people sort of are nervous at the start. And I was the worst, man. Let me tell you, I was worried. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't talk to anyone about it, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I'm really vocal about it. I'm vocal about sort of sharing my time and my experience with people, saying, hey, you're going to be fine, man. Just be protective of yourself, respect your ears, and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
But it does become a sort of a meditation thing, or a sort of an inner strength thing, meaning that you find that inner strength through reaching out, through looking for heroes, looking for mentors. Every time I read something that's uplifting, like, for example, some more advice that I'd like to share is, check what's coming into your head. Like, if you are watching negative news, maybe you don't need to see negative news more than you don't need to bury your head in the sand, but maybe you don't need to hear the news all the time, or maybe before you go to bed or something like that. Like, for example, when I have this routine that I don't record past a certain time at night. Mm-hmm. I allow myself a couple of hours to watch TV. I never used to watch TV, man. I was always busy doing stuff, but now I watch a little bit of TV, and I make sure the TV is not down. It's uplifting stuff. It's funny stuff. And, if you can open your heart to this sort of beauty, I know that sounds philosophical or anything like that, but it does come down to this, man. It comes down to philosophical stuff, because that's the whole thing about philosophy, right? You're thinking about stuff you can't actually change. That's why we become philosophical. And you do get philosophical. You're like, you know what, I can't change this, but I can change the way I feel about it. I can change the way I think about it. And that also comes down to, checking what's coming into your head. If someone's doing your head in, if they are negative, maybe you don't need that negativity so much. If a situation is bringing you down, maybe you don't need to be in that situation as much as you were before because you don't have the inner strength. Or maybe it's best I talk about myself. I don't have the inner strength to deal with that negativity anymore, so I try and reduce it. And by doing that, I've actually become more conscientious of myself, of other people around me, being conscientious of their feelings. I mean, when I was in my early 20s, man, I didn't think about nobody but myself. I was like, it's all about me. Mm-hmm. But now it's like, it's a big world, man. It's just full of beautiful people. And that's why it's made my music a little bit better, because when I write a song now, I'm wanting to reach people, man. I want to talk to people. I want to get to their soul. And that's what makes me a better singer, a better musician. It's a shame that it took Tinnitus to do it.
Yeah. OWC now brings you the Mini Stack STX, the world's first Thunderbolt Force certified storage and hub expander, perfectly sized to seamlessly stack with the Mac Mini and the ideal storage and connectivity companion for Thunderbolt or USB equipped computers and devices. With a universal SATA HDD SSD bay and NVMe M.2 PCIe SSD slot, you can expand your Mini's storage capacity to gigantic proportions. 3 Thunderbolt USB-C ports enable you to connect millions of Thunderbolt, USB, and future USB 4 drives, displays, AV mixers, cameras, and tablets, as well as desktop accessories like a keyboard, card reader, or mouse. Now, the possibilities of how you can use your Mac Mini are limited only to your imagination. Find the new Mini Stack STX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. The STX 100D from the Spectra 1964 Custom Shop is the big brother to the now famous STX 100, a fully discrete mic pre with dual transformer isolated Spectra 101 amplifiers. The STX 100D is exactly the same original circuit found in Stax, Ardent, AdVision, A&M, and Record Plant recording consoles. The sonic performance is identical. Best of all, it will plug into a single space of your standard 500 lunchbox. And if you want to add the sound of the famous Spectra C610 complementer, then check out the new STX 600 modules, combining the STX 100 mic pre and C610 in a single 500 module. Now you can get that same incredible sound in your studio that worked for famous producers like Tom Dowd with the STX mic pre's, BBDI, and complementers. Go to Spectra1964.com or call 801-797-0642. Well, let me drop in some more practical tips too for the studio and protecting our hearing. So, like I said, I discovered in my 20s that I had this low-level background noise that no longer went away by the next morning, and it scared me. It scared me a lot, actually, and I'm glad it did, because it was enough to scare me to want to do something about it, but not let it get worse. So I started doing things like wearing earplugs regularly to shows. If I went out to shows, I started being more conscious of the volume in the studio. Now, of course, my typical workday, I like to work until 6, and then the rest of the day is exercise and family time or whatever. So I don't have the speakers cranked up till the last thing I hear before bed, which I think is helpful. However, some stuff that helps me practice safer listening in the studio is, like you said, learning to work at lower volumes. Whenever something, so let me put it this way. Whenever I have to listen to something and I do have to judge the power and the bass of a sound, yes, I find I need to turn it up a lot of times. I may not need to turn it up as loud as I thought I used to, but I do need some volume to get the kind of, the Fletcher-Munson curve right for hearing the low end and the high end and the energy and power. But I don't need to hear it up there for very long. I can do that very quickly make a judgment call on a low cut filter or something like that and turn it back down. And the majority of stuff that we do and work on in the studio, it doesn't really need to be very loud. Like there's a lot of, you can hear balances between instruments more clearly, honestly, at lower levels, because we've now removed the bass in the high end and we're judging everything based on sort of a level playing field of mid-range information. So that's really helpful, especially when you're doing mixes on an Auratone speaker in mono down low. But also musical parts, when what we're really doing is judging, you know, the musical harmonic interaction of different parts in a mix or in a production. Most of that stuff we can make a judgment call on at very low volume, you know?
Absolutely.
And so it's great to train ourselves to do that. Another tool, really helpful tool that I learned from Bill Skibby up at Key Club Recording when we were working at his studio in Benton Harbor, Michigan many years ago, is he always had these gun earmuffs, like gun protection earmuffs hanging by the studio door. So we're talking about the big honking things that you just like put on their headphones, but they're just big plastic ear cups. And all they do is just block out tons of noise if you were going to a shooting range, for example, or if you were going to use them, you know, on a construction site. And you can just order these kind of things on Amazon or online. But have those hanging up on the wall all over the studio so that when you go from the control room out into the live room where the guitar amps are cranking or the drummer's got, you know, banging on a snare drum, you just grab those and put them on your ears before you go out there, or you grab them and put them around your neck so that they're handy the moment you need them. And God, that's such an ear saver, because then when you lean down in front of the drum kit to go adjust, you know, the kick drum mic or the snare drum mic, and the drummer just whacks a drum, it doesn't destroy your ears anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm going on a long tangent. There's lots more I can say, but let me turn it back over to you. Please do. Please do.
So I love the idea of the big ear cuffs. I've got them by the kitchen because if ever there's a fire alarm or if ever there's something that's too loud, I just grab them. They're literally within arm's reach. I can grab them. So I love that idea. I didn't know that people had them in recording studios. I have them by my kitchen just in case, like I say, a fire alarm goes off or something. A couple of other tips that I'd like to mention. You mentioned, you know, editing. I totally agree with you, man. There's a lot of work in the studio that doesn't need to be cranked up. For example, vocal editing. A lot of the time with vocal editing, you're editing out breaths, you're editing out all these little parts that you don't necessarily need to hear the tonal quality of the recording at that stage. You know, all these little sort of menial tasks that you do, you know, sort of organizational tasks that don't need your tonal sort of analysis of them. I do those with earplugs. Like I have them very low and I have earplugs in just to make sure no sharp sounds come out. So yeah, I also have a sound meter set up by my head when I'm mixing so that I can constantly know, and this is sort of a reassuring thing for myself, of what volume I'm operating at right now. So I know that I'm about 50 dB or something like that. I love the idea of having those headphones on when you go into different rooms, because my experience is that when you get to a venue, you're really excited. You found the venue. Maybe you had trouble finding the venue. You go straight into the door, and if you're opening, or if the opening artist is setting up before you, whatever, and you walk into a very loud room with loud drums, etc., like something like that, that can also be a problem. So I every time I walk into a live venue, I use earplugs, you know, just to make sure that there's no one setting up, or, you know, no one's going to scream any feedback as I walk into the venue, you know? So there's all even when I travel, I use some travel earmuffs that they fold away. You can fold them away in a very small sort of package. And I use those for the airplane, because on the airplane, it can get to be about 80 dB. And if you're on a long flight, like when I made my second album, was backwards and forwards to Washington, D.C. over Europe, and that was a long flight. So 80 dB, that is, and that's, you know, that can be taxing on your ears. So I use these earmuffs that I can fold away. All these little tips that you sort of pick up along the way that I think are very useful, man.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And, you know, a thought that pops into my head is also remembering not to beat yourself up for the times that you forgot, you know, like the time you forgot to bring the earplugs to the loud bar or whatever, just stick your fingers in your ear. Do be careful if you wad up toilet paper and stick it in your ear. I've tried to do that before, and I actually had a night many years ago. I was living in Hong Kong, and I had done that to, we were listening to a blues band all night. And at the end of the night, I actually couldn't get the toilet paper out of my ear, and I had to had to go up to the emergency room of a hospital, and they just reached in with little, needle nose pincers and pulled them out. So be cautious about what you do stuff in your ear. But like a flight, I might be on a flight and forget and not have what you just described. But just remember, rock stars, you can just take that moment, just be like, okay, screw it, I'll order some. I'll make sure I buy some for the next time.
Yeah.
And don't hesitate. Let me ask you this question, which I think is really critical. I don't know if you have kids. I do. I have a daughter. A lot of our listeners have kids, and I think a lot of the concern that we have is, how do we make sure that our kids don't accidentally cause themselves this horrible tinnitus and have to live with it if they can avoid it? So, what lessons have you learned about helping our children manage to avoid it?
Yeah, I've got a daughter. She's 16, and it's a discussion that comes up a lot in our house because I try and tell her. I say, look, I've got bad tinnitus. I don't want you to worry about it. I don't want you to get anxious about sound because you are most likely going to be okay. But you've got to be conscious of the fact that if you're using AirPods for an extended amount of time at high volume, you're putting yourself in risk. And I try and explain it to her in a way that doesn't make her anxious about sound, because I don't want her to go out in the world and be anxious about it. But I think it's a case of talking and educating them, but also a case of reminding them, because when you're young, you don't feel that you are facing that threat. Like even my daughter, she's got someone in the house, her father, who has got bad tinnitus, and it's a subject that comes up a lot in the house because we try and keep the volume at sort of decent volumes. But even then, she sort of feels protected because she's young. So I sort of have to gently remind her that, look, this is something that can happen to young people as well. And the reason why is because I see so many people on the forums, so many young girls and boys, maybe in their late teens, and they're already experiencing it. And it's heartbreaking, man, because I got it at 27. So at least I got my early rock and roll years out, without having it. And so I think it's a case of generally reminding them, gently reminding them, but not trying to create anxiety in them. But it's definitely a case of having to keep reminding them of the situation.
Well, I find the big challenge is, how do we convince our kids to put earplugs in at a loud, a live concert or a live show? We went to the movies the other day. We went to go see the new James Bond film at a film theater here, and it was insanely loud. I had to hold my fingers in my ears for all the previews. And kids aren't going to do that. I didn't do that. I didn't have a parent who was, telling me to wear earplugs or even offering them to me. But even when I offer earplugs to people, and this is another tip I got for you rock stars, don't bring one set of foam earplugs with you in your pocket when you go out. Bring about 3 sets so you can hand them out to people next to you, because not everybody else isn't thinking about this. They don't realize how loud it's going to be. But it's a challenge. So if you're listening to this, and you can drop a comment in, if you're watching this on YouTube or wherever you're listening, give us some feedback. If you've got good tips for, how to encourage our kids to actually wear some earplugs and get used to it, please share it. Cause I do agree that they're at risk of worse tinnitus than we were at risk of, just because there's loud volume all the time around them.
Yeah.
You had one of your 12 tools listed was called Dealing with a Spike. And I wonder if you wanted to break that down for us.
Yeah. So I'm going through a spike right now. And a spike, for anybody can probably guess, it's when your bass volume goes higher. And it's one of the most difficult things for someone with tinnitus to deal with, because you get to a certain level, you think, okay, I can deal with this. And then all of a sudden it gets higher. Spikes don't always last. They can come back to the base level where it was before. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they do. I'm currently going through a very, very bad spike, but I'm dealing with it with all the tools and all the sort of methods that I've been here before, basically. I know what to expect and I know what to do. So basically dealing with a spike, the first thing you got to say to yourself is that, so if you have tinnitus and all of a sudden your tinnitus gets worse, the first thing I say to myself is, I've been here before. I got through it then. I'm going to get through it now. So that's a very important thing, to get the mental side of it, get that in place. You've been here before. You were all right then. You're going to be all right now. That's important to do. Second thing is try and reduce volumes around you. Don't exacerbate it by, sort of continuing with loud volume. So if I'm going for a spike like I am now, I try and keep volumes, low. I try and avoid sort of, if I can find other work to do, like I like to write when I'm going for a spike, I write instead of sort of mixing or doing something like that. But if you can't do that, just work at a slightly lower volume. The way to get out of a spike is to get back to habituation. Habituation is where you are comfortable with your tinnitus. It's like the nirvana for tinnitus sufferers. You feel like, it's fine. It's there, but it's, I just get on with my life. That's habituation. It takes a bit of time. And after a spike, it can take about 2 or 3 months to get back to that place.
Wow.
But during those 2-3 months, the most important thing is just to keep your head in the right place. Exercise, relieve stress by swimming, running, walking. Walking is fantastic exercise because you can write songs while you're going.
Yeah.
So yes, get the mental side of it, get the physical side of it, maybe reduce alcohol for that period, maybe reduce caffeine. But like I say, the most important thing is just to remember that you've probably been there before and you were fine then and you're going to be fine now. That's what I say to myself now,
The Toy Box Studio, aka Recording Studio Rockstar's headquarters, is proud to announce that it is now an official Phantom Focus mix room designed by Carl Tatz. Yay! The beautiful new control room includes Carl's acoustic lens room treatment with the PFM HD 1000 master reference monitors laser aligned for holographic stereo imaging and depth of field with accuracy from 20 hertz to over 20 kilohertz. I've never mixed on a speaker system this awesome before, and it feels great. I used to feel like I would commit to a mix, cross my fingers, and hope that it would translate to the real world. But now, when I dream up a sound that I want to create in the studio, I just turn the mix knobs and the Phantom Focus monitors tell me truthfully when I get it right. Amazing. Check out my complete interview with Carl Tatz on episode 50 of the podcast and discover the secret to massively improving your monitor setup at carltatzdesign.com/mixroom-mentor. Yeah, well, that's fascinating. And I'm really realizing talking to you just how lucky I am too, because the tinnitus that I experienced and that made me aware of it is just a very low level noise. It's almost like, living in a world of analog tape.
Yeah.
And, that's nothing compared to what I'm hearing you describe of, having to deal with a real loud tone and stuff like that. I think I do have tones and I get the occasional like boop, that comes and goes. And I always, I think people like, the word on the street is, oh, that's a hearing, one of your little hairs dying off or something like that. So who knows? But it's a real thing and we all deal with it. And it's important to try and avoid it as best we can. There are some other things I thought might be worth mentioning too, that might be encouraging. So wearing earplugs, the foam ones, which I find is the most useful way to avoid loud volume because it cuts down a lot on the sound level, and and it's easiest to have in your pocket anywhere you go. At first, when I was younger, I'd put them in at a live show and I thought it changed it killed the sound and killed the excitement for me. But now I actually think things sound way better if I go to a live event or something's loud, I put those in. Yeah. It actually improves the sound. And I think a good way to think about it, rock stars, is that it's almost like a bass boost because it cuts down on most of the mids and higher frequencies and upper stuff, but you still sort of feel the low end. So I actually find I prefer that sonically at a live show. It kind of makes everything sound a little bit better to me. But also earplugs if you're on stage. I'm curious what you think about this, Jack, but I think that, you know how people, when they're trying to find the pitch, will put their finger up and hold one ear to try and do that? I think that earplugs kind of give you a natural pitch referencing. So I wonder if you find it's easier to sing in tune being used to wearing earplugs, or if you find it's harder, and if you've had people talk about that at all.
Yeah, so on stage I use a pair of Hunter's earplugs. They are what hunters who go, shooting rifles, that's what they use. They're minus 36. And when I went to get them fitted, the woman who was the lady who was fitting them, she knew who I was, and she was like, "Oh, don't you need these for music?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Well, how are you going to hear?" I was like, "I can hear it because I can hear a lot of the low frequency information on my chest, and I can feel it. I can pitch from that, and I can still hear, some of the mids and stuff like that. So because it doesn't totally block the sound, because your cranium only attenuates at about minus 30 dB. So sound is always going to come in, but your earplugs will just reduce that drastically going in directly to the ear. So they're a massive help. I personally can't gig without them. And I've gotten a bit like yourself. I actually feel more comfortable with them in because it does sound better in my ears. You get rid of some of that high end, that harsh high end. So when it comes to pitching, it wasn't really the pitching that was the problem for me, because I felt the pitching was better because I was listening to myself inside of me, if that makes sense. I would feel the guitar vibrate against my chest, and I would perform better, actually. I would sing better. I don't know why, but I would just sing better. The one thing that I found was something that I had to get used to was the comfort zone of it. I felt like I needed more vocal. And what I didn't want was a situation where I've got these really nice earplugs in, but all I'm doing is turning up the volume, turning up the volume of the monitor, because that's sort of counterintuitive. So I had to train my brain, and that was a little bit tricky. I had to get used to it. I would have the volume at around 82 dB on stage. And I'd feel happy with that, because the calculation that I would make is that if the volume is 82 dB on stage and I got minus 26, I'm somewhere in the 60s, you know what I mean? And I can deal with 60. But I had to sort of get my mind trained to that. And after a while, I not only got trained to it, I actually enjoy it. I love the idea that I can do what I love doing and not have to worry too much about it. I mean, just to give a bit of context, I used to do shows that were so loud, the bar staff, who were like the other side of the room, would come over to me and say, "Dude, you need to turn it down, man, because we can't hear the orders for the drinks." That's sort of how loud I used to like it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, I used to love rocking the place, but so yeah, I keep it down a bit, and it's a matter of, it's like anything, I suppose. You just got to get used to it.
Yeah, I know that there are some famous folks out there that have dealt with tinnitus too, and even talked about it. One person that I met that was famous to me was, I actually went and had a chance to interview David Blackmer of DBX, who then started Earthworks. And his son Eric Blackmer took it over after him. But when I was talking to David Blackmer, he was going through this process of inventing. He wanted to create the best speaker, and he realized that in order to create the best speaker, he needed to actually first start by creating the best microphone so that he could measure the speaker accurately. So, and his Earthworks microphones are famous for accurately reproducing signals way up above 30K, 40K, like more than twice as high as the human ear is supposedly able to hear. And yet when I was interviewing him, he already said he couldn't hear above 12K. Like he was in his older years. And I was really struck by that. And he pointed out to me and opened my understanding up that even though you can't hear a tone above that frequency, if somebody was to just play a pure tone, You absolutely can hear the way that the very ultra high frequencies are interacting with the lower frequencies. So
Wow.
that was really encouraging to me too, because I think, hearing loss and frequency loss is part of a life in music, and also it's a part of aging. And it's just really encouraging to realize that, oh, you can still know what's going on. Yes, you might
Yeah.
not hear if there's a spike in a higher frequency, but you can hear the way it all adds up, and you can still make great music, and you can also
Yeah.
design, great microphones and speakers and stuff. But
Yeah, absolutely.
Pete Townsend, I think, is another person I've heard talk about dealing with tinnitus, because obviously he had a pretty damn loud guitar behind him.
Yeah.
Have you heard of or met some other people that are pretty notable who've come forward about tinnitus?
You know what? You sort of get two types of musicians. You get the one type of musician who perhaps has it and doesn't want anybody to know. I've met, or I've spoken to, one or two named musicians that sort of, they're not comfortable, and that's cool. That's cool. Then you get the other type of musician who is quite happy to talk about it. And one thing that struck me is just how many people are worried about it, have it, are concerned that they might be getting it. It's just like, wow, all these people are not talking about it. So that's sort of been an eye opener for me. And of course, I've researched it, because another part of sort of keeping my head in the right place is researching other people that have it and how they have dealt with it. And there's a lot of people that have it and they just get on with their life. Like I say, I know several DJs have it, because DJs they have it even worse, because they have their headphones on, and they probably have the
Right.
headphones on really, really loud for long periods of time when they're gigging. So yes, I think the short answer is that there's a lot more musicians than you think have it, or they're really worried about it. And don't get me wrong, I don't go around talking about this when we're recording or gigging. I just don't talk about it, because it's not something that people necessarily want to hear. But if the subject is brought up, of course, then I'll sort of talk about it. And it's amazing, when the subject is brought up, you nearly always find someone go, yeah, man, I'm really struggling with it, or yeah, I'm really worried about it. So personally, I feel passionate about getting this message out, about getting an understanding of volume, getting an understanding of what your ears are exposed to, because I think the more people are aware of what their ears are exposed to, just the better it will be for everybody, for future generations, for future generations of musicians. Like, I have this thing in the book, man. It sounds a bit crazy, but like, the monitoring system that we have is still a pretty antiquated, way of doing it. Monitors blasting loud noise out towards the musician. I'm thinking, I know there's in-ear monitors. I've never tried them, so I can't really comment on them, but I don't know if I would be quite comfortable with having in-ear monitors in my ear, directly inside my ear. So I'm thinking, are there better ways that we can do it? Is there more sort of technological ways we can do it? You know what I mean? So that's why I sort of feel vocal about the whole thing and passionate about the whole thing, because maybe by talking about it, we can just find better solutions. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, when you bring up the DJ thing, that's fascinating to me, and it makes sense, because that is some pumping loud music with a lot of bass. Have any of the DJs offered to you their version of a solution?
Um, I'm in dialogue with one guy, like I mentioned at the start, and we exchange sort of messages from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the first guy to tell me, you're going to be okay. And he'd sort of been down that road before me, and he said, look, you're going to be fine. Just go with it. You just chill, protect your ears. Don't be stupid with your ears. Always protect them, but you're going to be okay. And that was a big thing for me. That was a turning point for me. So they don't I haven't heard anybody come up with better solutions. What I have heard is a lot of people trying to ignore it. And that is something I don't think is the right attitude to take. I think
Right.
that you don't need to worry about it, but just be like, like you were saying yourself, just to be a bit more conscientious of it, I think that is probably the better thing to do. Because I've spoken to a lot of musicians where they go, yeah, I got this thing in my ear, and I'm, and I say, how's it going? And they go, yeah, it's going okay. I just get on with it. But what worries me is that maybe they're not protecting their ears. That's what worries me.
This episode is sponsored by Recording Studio Rockstars Academy. Are you ready to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level and make your best record ever? Then visit the Academy to find the course that's right for you. Want to record killer drums in your studio? Then check out Rockstars of Drums to learn how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a professional Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Or if you're ready to start mastering your own records at home, then check out Rockstars of Mastering, where I walk you through exactly how I mastered my own record, Skadoosh, the soundtrack to this podcast, in fact, using nothing but plugins in PreSonus Studio One. These techniques would work for you no matter what DAW you're using right now. And if mixing is your focus, then check out my free course, Mix Master Bundle, where I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins in Pro Tools. Plus, you get a look at how I recorded everything in my studio and multi-track downloads to practice your mixing and even include in your mix portfolio if you want. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started now, or look for the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. You mentioned something which I think is worth reminding. Rockstars, I'm going to tell you, it is okay to actually put earplugs in and then put headphones on. So if you're in a tracking situation, don't discount that, because I think it's possible to strike the balance of the mix by having the headphones at the volume you need in a rehearsal, in a tracking situation. But also with the earplugs, just bring down the overall volume of everything and make that work. So that could be a helpful.
I've got something else as well that I discovered myself. This might sound crazy. It's interesting because I had a musician contact me just a few days ago, asking me this same question: do you use earplugs when you track? And I said to him, I used to. And that was fine. It's a perfectly great way of doing it. No problem whatsoever. Just like you say, find the right balance and it's all good. But I got another trick. This is the sort of madness that you come up with in these situations. So I was tracking a vocal, and it was a rock vocal. My music tends to be a little bit more softer, but this was I was guesting on track. I found this, and I think it's a great solution. And it's so simple. So the top end frequencies are the ones that aggravate my tinnitus. So after a while, I thought, my God, I've been so stupid. All I need to do is EQ the top end from, from 2000, say 2/3 of the way up. If I EQ the rest out, I'm left with low frequency information, which I can pitch from. I'm left with some mid information, which I can get the excitement of the track, and I don't get the highs. It was such a simple solution. I couldn't believe that I hadn't thought about it before. Because what it means is because when you're tracking vocals, the problem that you have, and this was exactly what this guy was asking me, he says, I got to track some vocals. Should I use earplugs? The problem that you have is timing and pitch. I looked into getting one of these watches that gives you a pulse. You can sync it up to your, I think they're called sound brenners or something like that. You can pitch it up. You can have it go to the tempo of your DAW, so you can sync it. And I thought about using that. I didn't go down that route, but the problem I had was timing. I found it hard to get my timing right, and my vocal is based a lot on timing. So I needed something where I could get the timing and I could get the pitch, but without the high end aggravation. And that was it was so simple, man. And it works for me. I use headphones. I don't necessarily have earplugs in, but I EQ all the top end out.
Yeah, I think that's great. So I have, I think it's called a Behringer Power Play, and it has 4 headphone outputs, and they each have a bass and a treble knob on it. And there's often times where I thought, like, why is they making this so complicated? But that's the perfect reason, is just take the treble off of your headphones. And I remember also hearing people talk about the was it the Tascam T20s or something like that? The headphones that you'd find in studios all over Nashville, and they were just not very exciting headphones. But people pointed out that the reason they liked them for the studios because they were dull, because they didn't blow your ears up for all day wearing them. So that's a great tip. Well, Jack, this has been awesome having you on the show.
Yes.
I've got a closing question for you. I like to ask all my guests. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine here, and you go back in time. I'm pretty sure I know what the answer is, but you're going to go back in time and find young Jack Rubinacci and say, listen, dude, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the recording studio one day. What advice would you go back and give yourself if you could?
I would say anything that you go through in your life is a path to get you to the artist that you want to be. Because eventually you will become the producer, the guitarist, the artist that you were meant to be, but you're not going to get there the easy way. So don't sweat the hard stuff, because it's there to make you develop into the artist that you are going to become. And that's what happened with me. I got asked this exact same question a while ago. They said, if you could go back in time, which time would you go back to? And I said, I wouldn't go back in time, because I wouldn't be the artist that I am today. And to be the artist that I am today, I've had to go through everything I've gone through, all the recordings, all the songwriting, all the collaborations, etc., to be where I am today. And I wouldn't have got it if I'd have sort of bypassed any of that stuff. So if I could go back, I'd say don't sweat the hard times, because they're going to make you a better musician, a better songwriter, and a better singer. And just, go with it and do it with your heart. So there's been times, because of my character, I've been reserved and I've made a mistake. When you do it, I'd say to my younger self, do it with your heart 100%, because that's the only way the good stuff's going to come out.
That's great, man. I love it. And it's really encouraging too. I'm 54 now, and being reminded of the way you say it about just stick to it and you will become the artist that you want to be. A lot of our listeners are in the age range that I'm at too. And I think it's exciting to think that, this chapter moving forward in my life still holds the discovery of me, the artist,
Yeah, man.
That's great stuff. Well, dude, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Thank you for all your wonderful insights on addressing this topic that doesn't get addressed enough. Rock stars, I hope that's helpful. I encourage you to drop comments in and let us know what you think, or share any tips that you've come up with for dealing with stuff like that. The link to your book, we'll make sure that is included in the show notes. So rock stars, you can go check out and get a copy of Overcoming Tinnitus, 12 Tools That Helped Me Overcome Tinnitus as a musician. I think that's going to be really helpful. Jack, let the rock stars know, where do you want them to go to learn more about you, find you online if they want to follow you, or just start a dialogue?
Yep. Anybody can feel free to contact me if they have any questions. JackRubinacci.com. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, Jack Rubinacci. And please get in touch if you have any questions. I want to say thank you to you, man. I really, really enjoyed this. This was a beautiful show. I felt it and I feel you. I think you're wonderful, man. And I just want to say thank you so much for letting me have this opportunity to share this.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Thank you for joining us. I really enjoy the way you tell stories and share all this stuff too. You're great at it. And then Rockstars, Rubinacci has 2 C's. Otherwise, it's all single letters.
Yeah.
So, Jack, great to meet you, man. I look forward to meeting you in person. And thanks for listening, Rockstars. Jack, thanks for joining us. Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who help make this episode possible. OWC, Spectra 1964, Samply, Carl Tatz Design, and Isotope. Remember to use the coupon codes ROCK10 at isotope.com/rockstars for 10% off any individual plugin purchase, or start your extended 30-day free trial subscription to get access to lots of plugins. And sign up for your free account at samplyaudio.com and get 2 projects now. Or use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months of subscription. Plus, use the coupon ROCKSTAR for 10% off any course at Recording Studio Rockstars Academy for a limited time. You'll find links to all these wonderful sponsors in our show notes. Just scroll down. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and John Richardson for additional podcast and video production. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.